Okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome to this Silver Sands webinar. My name is Ross Parry and I'm delighted to be joined by Mark Ison. Mark's practice lead for desktop and devices, and he's going to guide us through Microsoft Endpoint Manager today. So this is a really interesting topic. Mark's going to be bringing you up to date with the latest tips and tricks for Microsoft Endpoint Manager. Before Mark does that, I'll just kick off with a quick introduction to Silver Sands in one slide. So we have been in business for over 30 years. We're a professional services organisation specialising in Microsoft 365 and cloud hybrid IT for enterprise users. We focus on the following areas. So the large circle at the top is Microsoft 365, which contains three key components. Firstly, Office 365, featuring apps like Teams, SharePoint and OneDrive. The second component is Windows 10, your desktop operating system. And the third component is Enterprise Mobility and Security for managing and securing your endpoint devices. So the large circle bottom left is for Power Platform. We've seen a huge amount of growth for business applications, reporting and dashboards through the use of Power Apps, Power Automate and Power BI. The large circle bottom right is Microsoft Azure, and in this area we deliver, manage and integrate both on-premise and cloud infrastructure into hybrid IT solutions. Between the large circles we have identity management, governance and security. All are crucial aspects of technical implementation to enable a protected end user experience. And linking all these circles together is our support offerings. So we provide managed and ad hoc service support, and that covers all of the services that we offer. Finally, at the heart of what we do in the center of the graphic are people and devices. So these should be the focus for any business change activity, but sadly this is not always the case. To support any technical delivery, we have built a proven user adoption capability where our change management team work closely with your business and your business users to understand their skill set and any challenges they may have adopting new technologies. So from this, they then help you to decide how best to use Microsoft 365 in your organization and put in place a framework to encourage more productive ways of working. So that's Silver Sands in a slide. I'd now like to welcome Mark Ison, who is practice lead for desktop and devices, to kick off the webinar.
Good morning, everyone. As Ross says, my name is Mark Ison, practice lead for desktop and devices with Silver Sands. I've been with the company for about 13, 14 years, working in the desktop and device space for that period of time. Now, what I'm going to be doing for you today is going to be going through. We've only got two slides, effectively, which is probably good news for quite a lot of you. Two slides. One slide which is going to talk about what Endpoint Manager is, and then after that we're going to be jumping into the Endpoint Manager portal, doing a quick tour around that, pointing out some of the newer, some of the newer functionality that they've added into it. And then followed by a final slide, which is talking about the roadmap, things that are coming. So, to start off, what is Endpoint Manager? So I can imagine the majority of you are probably familiar with Configuration Manager, obviously previously part of the System Center suite and had been for many, many years, but was always kind of separated from the other parts of the System Center suite, like your Virtual Machine Manager, Operations Manager. They were all in their own little bubble, and Config Manager always had its own separate one, being the first one to move on to the branch releases and things like that. What they've done is they've taken that on-premise solution of System Center Configuration Manager and taken the cloud solution of Intune, merged them together to create the Microsoft Endpoint Manager solution as a standalone cloud solution, or integrated with Endpoint Manager Configuration Manager as well, to provide the ultimate hybrid platform, the home for all of your device management needs. That hybrid platform that Config Manager provides is the best way to introduce yourself into a cloud management solution, moving from your on-premise into the cloud using the co-management solution that's part of Endpoint Manager, Configuration Manager. This allows you to get your devices enrolled into Endpoint Manager to begin with and perform basic tasks like wiping and synchronizing policies, but then moving forward, introducing workloads into the Intune world, into the cloud world, like Windows updates, client application delivery, endpoint management, and security. All of those things can be phased and moved over into Endpoint Manager, so that you can. It's a stepping stone. It's the perfect way to journey your way into the cloud. Obviously, as time's moved on, something which has become more prevalent, especially over the last 6 to 9 months, things like autopilot, being able to deploy your machines remotely without the user having to be in an office, being able to get all its policies, MDM or group policy, domain join outside of the office. All of these functionalities are now available within the autopilot service. Desktop analytics, for anyone who's not using that, it's a free solution as part of Endpoint Manager, allowing you to see a true view of the devices in your estate, what the hardware is, serial numbers, and all sorts of various hardware information. But not only that, but also the applications that you've got in your environment. So how many installs there are, if there's any known compatibility issues, and if there are, and if there's a support statement of what you need to do to resolve the issue, then they provide you with details of that as well. And lastly, the endpoint security side. There is still obviously a bigger security portal that governs the whole of Azure and the whole platform, but specifically to the desktop management, your Windows Defender and Advanced Threat Protection, all now housed within the Endpoint Manager portal. So I'm going to jump into the portal now, hopefully. There we go. So this is a demo portal, so it's clean. There's not a whole lot in here, if I'm honest. There are a few bits which I'm going to jump out into a different one, just because there's some actual proper data that I'll be able to show you. So first of all, obviously, when you sign in, you end up you come to this main home landing page where you've got basic information about your resource estate, your compliance, enrollment, configuration, health status, basic information, and something which they are slowly introducing and adding more in to help you are these guided scenarios. So any of these, you can press start and it will start taking you through that process of what it is you need to do to get it out. You don't need to know where specifically to go and find to create that app. It's a guided scenario to help get you guys into the flow of what it is that you're supposed to be doing with this portal. So that's within the home section. The other section that some of you may have noticed or heard of before is the Microsoft Managed Desktop. Obviously, I don't have access to any of those things here, but what the Managed Microsoft Desktop is effectively a leasing service that Microsoft provide. You lease the devices from them. There are a number of OEMs. It's not just Surface devices. It's Dell, HP, Lenovo. They all provide it. Where they will provide you with the device, you will use it. If you have a problem with it, you will log a call with your support, which will be technically Microsoft. They will then be able to resolve those issues. If you need, and then once it needs replacing, a different device will be swapped out. Any hardware failures, again, device swapped out. Microsoft looks after the whole thing, and as part of that service, they will also develop the whole policy solution and deployment part of it as well. So if you are looking to offload your internal build process and management, then Microsoft do have a solution for that as part of this service. So I'm going to move on to the dashboard. So obviously we've got the home, which gives you the overall view. You've then got a dashboard, which is similar to how you might see in Azure. With any of these, we can create new dashboards, we can edit the dashboard, add any extra bits that we want into it, make it look however we want. I think there are even some in there where there was one before where you were able to provide a link to a video or something along those lines. So if there was a tutorial video, or for example, if you were to take this recording, store it in your SharePoint, when your users go in, you can direct it to it so they can have a quick tour of it before they actually go and use it. So no different to Azure. Make it look how you feel, how you want, specific to you. Preview it. When you're happy, hit save. Okay. Not much else from a dashboard standpoint. Say, just make that look and feel how you would like it to. We're going to move down these sections. There is another section here for all services, but we'll jump into that one. We'll jump to that one towards the end because there's a few hidden bits in there. So in the device section of the portal, we've got a device overview, enrollment status, any errors or alerts, compliance issues. Just for argument's sake, if I jump over onto this one and look at that overview, we've now got this information here about all of our devices, what numbers we've got, any alerts that may have come up, compliance issues, a general overview. And I will say, although it comes under the report section, all this information is exportable in either to any third-party reporting solution or into Power BI. There is a section where they provide you with your specific feed for all the telemetry and all the reporting. Just jump back into this one. So when it comes to configuring the platforms, previously it was a little bit clunky because we had to go into all devices, and then we would go and create, and then we would start having a look at all the devices, and we'd have to start filtering. It makes it a little bit difficult because we want to go and create a configuration profile. So we'll do that, and people tended to get a little bit lost. You wouldn't have thought it'd be that difficult, but it's, there are a lot of options to choose from with all the various policies that you've got to choose from. To make it a little bit simpler, and also when you've got all these policies on this view, they all are bundled in here. As we can see here, we've got iOS, we've got Windows, and they're kind of all bundled in together. Now we can do it via device type, which just simplifies the whole view and whole process of what it is that we're doing from that side of things. So from a configuration profile standpoint, obviously there are profiles available for all the operating system types. From a Windows standpoint, either Windows 10 and later or Windows 8.1. And as you can see, we've got a whole list of various options here. There's multi-user device, shared multi-user device. That one's actually, I think, specifically for the Surface. I can't remember what they're called, the big Surface screens that they use for the meetings. Can't remember what they're called off the top of my head. And obviously a whole load of other settings in there. Addition upgrade to deploy a license key, domain join, which is needed for the autopilot process. Endpoint protection. Now, again, this is just an overall, here's where you can set all the configuration profiles. Things like endpoint protection, identity protection, I actually recommend you don't set them up here. We've got an endpoint security section. When we get to that, you'll see that's the best place for it, and it'll all be amalgamated at the end. The one key one that I wanted to show you in here, in case people were unaware, is the administrative templates. One of the restrictions of, or one of the drawbacks of MDM is that it doesn't have as many options as group policy natively does. So what we can do is create an administrative template profile, and as it sounds, it is a way of configuring the group policies that it's brought over that didn't exist in MDM, and they've managed to bring those over. So if you're configuring settings for Edge, the new Edge Chromium, this, for example, the administrative template is where at the moment you're going to configure most of your settings for those sides of things. Again, computer configuration, user configuration. So something you're kind of used to, and it's not here at the moment, but I believe that something that is coming is the ability to import, import your own ADMX files or ADM files. So for example, people that use Chrome Enterprise, obviously there's very little MDM group policy wise, so they'll eventually will be able to import those policies and use them on the devices. That's something that's coming in the future. The other bits from a Windows standpoint, PowerShell scripts, something that you can do in SCCM at the moment. If you have so obviously we can't do traditional login scripts or log off scripts, startup scripts, those kind of things in an MDM world, they don't exist. But what we can do is add PowerShell scripts that can run on a device. The only thing with it, just to bear in mind, is that we can't be as specific with when it is that runs, the time frame in which it runs, which we could have been with either group policy or SCCM. We have a little bit more control than what we do from an Intune standpoint. The last policies are the Windows 10 update rings. So being able to create an update policy to assign those feature updates and quality updates to your environment. Now this is great, but I'm sure that there are some of you in a position where the drawback to this profile, or the irritation previously, is when we create it, we choose what the update ring is, the semi-annual channel, and we choose what the deferral date is for both quality and feature updates. So we might put that as 3 days, for example, and put that as 120. So we've got a few months there where it's being tested with before it goes out to everyone else. But let's say that that causes a problem, or you're slowly rolling out, and the problem that lots of people are getting into is that they start their Windows 10 rollout on 1909, but they get halfway through it and 2004 has come out, and now they're in a bit of a sticky situation. How do we get everyone onto 1909, but some are going to 2004, and it just becomes a little bit confusing. What they've now done is added in this option here for feature updates. If we create a profile here for the feature updates and say, well, my target version is 1909 and I assign it to the same machines, it will override the update policy that we've got that tells it to go to the latest version. It will consider that as the latest target version and to go no further than that. So a great little addition that allows you to hold yourself at a certain level while you get your rollout completed, before then, I guess, opening the floodgates and moving into the evergreen world of your 6 monthly updates. So I'm going to leave the Windows devices from there and move over to the mobile, the other types of devices, the mobile devices, the less traditional ones, the iOS, Mac OS, and Android. I'm not going to go into them in too much detail because we've done them before. There's not all that much new with these devices, other than when you are going to create the policies, there was always there's a separation with iOS in particular, that you've got devices that you own and have issued out, and there are devices that you've owned and have been issued out via either the device enrollment program or now Apple Business Manager. You can obviously have far more control over those devices than you can just the standard ones, either personally owned, BYOD, whatever it is it may be. And it got a little bit confusing as to which ones worked on which device, which enrollment type. And they used to refer to it as, ones options that worked in supervised mode. They've now altered that and made it a bit more, again, user friendly. Device restrictions, whatever we want. And now within the name, within these settings, we've now got the enrollment types that it supports. It is quite wordy, but once you kind of got your head around it, so these settings will work on any enrolled device type. These devices that will work on devices that have been enrolled manually or through the automated enrollment, and these settings will only work if you are using the DEP. So beforehand they were kind of all stacked on top of each other. They've now been completely separated out. So if you're not using a supervised device or a device enrollment program device, well, you might as well ignore these settings because you can't apply them. From a Android perspective, the major difference here is that although there are policies for the legacy enrollment type of the Android administrator, we can still create policies for that. We aren't actually really able to create any kind of enrollment profiles or anything else like that for it. It's them slowly removing the functionality away, because I think it was with Android version 8 or above, the administrator old way of management, it doesn't work anymore. You've got to use the Android Enterprise solution now if you want to have the device fully enrolled. From a Mac standpoint, again, not a whole lot has really moved forward in the Mac world. Microsoft still stand by that any Mac MDM option that Apple decide to add into the MDM stack, they will support from day one. They will make that available, but unfortunately, they're not adding a whole lot in. Not a whole lot has come into it. We can apply profiles and VPNs, Wi-Fi's, networks, and one of the most recent ones that has come in is the endpoint protection. So Windows Defender as an AV client on Mac devices, we can now deploy that and manage it on those. Other than that, not a whole lot has really changed in the Mac world. Again, if you are using the device enrollment program, you then are opening up those gates to allow for much greater and granular levels of control on those device types. So from an application standpoint, everything has been simplified a little bit again. We can break it out rather than looking at all our applications from all our various sources. We can now look at it very specifically to an operating system type or hardware type. When we are adding the applications, so for Windows, we've got store apps, we've got built-in Microsoft 365 apps that's been rebranded from Office 365 to Microsoft, and also we can very simply create edge deployments that work in the same way as those 365 ones. So this is an example of where if you've got co-management and you're not using Intune to deploy or manage your 365, your click to run applications, I'd strongly recommend it, because by creating a deployment for those 365 apps, it's a constant deployment and keeps them up to date with the level that you're keeping it at. The gotcha that I will be very clear on with this one is around your base version or your base instance of Office, and when users then start wanting Visio or Project or anything like that included in it. So we might create an Office app suite, doesn't include Skype for Business, doesn't include Publisher or Access, and we push that out to people based on the update channel of the semi-annual channel enterprise. Now, if that user then says, oh, I need the project desktop client, and you've got a standalone deployment for that, and it's the preview channel, they won't work. They will not install next to each other. They have to be on the same lines as each other. So if someone is a preview user for the overall suite, they have to be an overall preview user for the desktop, for the project and Visio as well. That also extends onto the perpetual 2016 and 2019 versions. So within the Endpoint Manager portal, I can't tell it that I want to include a perpetual 2016 or 2019 version of either Project or Visio, but I've got licenses for it. So what I can do is I can use the Office customization tool, and when I go and create the XML for that, I can then choose that it's got a volume license. And then when I add the volume license, when I go to the licensing and activation, or is it general installation, there's a section where, because I've said that, it's going to ask me for what I can't quite see it in there for some annoying reason, but it will ask me, there we go, whether I'm using a KMS or if I'm using a Mac for that Visio standard license, and then I can enter it in there and it will apply it. Again, the caveat is you need to make sure that the version of Office that you're using for the 2016 or 2019 is compatible with the version of 365 that you're using. So if you're deploying 2016, I think it's something like the 16 version of Office 365 going up to 18 versions, and then from 18 to the most recent, you have to have the 2019. So there's lots of complexity around that, but just as a heads up and a caveat, if you are doing your Office deployments and things aren't installing or saying I can't install because something's already there, that's the reason why. iOS and Android apps, not much has changed from that side of things. We're adding apps from our either ones that we've line of business ones that we've had created, or via the iOS App Store. The main thing, or the main question when it comes to the applications and the overall device management solution is, do I need the device to be fully enrolled in managed, or do I just need the applications to be managed? Your ultimate security question is, what's more important, the device or the data? And the answer to that, 9 times out of 10, should be the data. So in general, in a BYOD scenario, we don't need to worry about the device. All this device enrollment stuff, we don't need to worry about it, because we can use app protection policies. Again, these have been around in Intune for years now. Not a whole lot has moved on with them from that side of things, but we choose what apps it is that we want it to apply to. That's either public apps in the store that have the APIs assigned, and We know which ones they are because they're all listed here, effectively any Microsoft app, or we can add our own custom apps into that as well if we wanted to. So just select one. And then same as before, we choose what our data protection options are. How is data going to be transferred around? The main thing with this is that it's all just little improvements here, there and everywhere. So if we say that sending organization to other applications, it's now not just policy managed apps. We've got policy managed apps with OS sharing or open-in and share filtering so that the device can work how you need it to. One of the big issues that people used to have is that their device would be enrolled, they'd be using Outlook, it'd be managed, all their contacts are in there, but when the phone rings, the contacts don't come through. By enabling OS sharing, and there's a whole myriad of additional options, and being able to transfer telecommunication data to any dialer application means that it's able to then pull out that contact information. So lots of little user experience improvements is what's been going into here over the last year or so, and that's the same across both the Android and iOS application protection side of things. On top of that, to improve the general usability of that application, is we can create application configuration policies. Again, these have been around for a long time, but what they've done is they've just made it easier for you. Put in a name there, choose the platform, or choose an application. The only, again, caveat around here is that they are slowly adding simplicity to the applications. If I choose Outlook and go next and then settings, I can either choose XML or a configuration designer. If I choose the configuration designer, I then have preset options. Me personally, I hate the focused inbox. I can turn it off. When the user first signs in, it will be turned off by default because it confuses people. It's lots of extra questions that you don't want the user to have to answer. Set it up the way that you feel that they might feel, I guess, most user friendly with, and assign that to them. With the application protection, even with the device not being enrolled, as soon as a user signs into that application with their corporate ID, the policy will come down onto that device and it will then become managed and everything will be controlled how you've set. If the user already has Outlook, the management will still be able to apply to it, and that management will also only apply to the corporate profile. If they then switch over in the same Outlook app from the corporate profile over to the personal, they will be able to continue doing whatever it is they want to do without the restrictions that the application would be applying otherwise. Okay. The other bits around the applications and the policies, similar to the administrative templates where you're able to create those office policies, we can also create office policies specifically within here. So again, it's very similar. So straight down to configure policies. It's similar to the administrative templates that we were looking at. Configure policies, again, it's just a default set of policies that you're using on your devices for your office deployment at the moment in a group policy world. If you've then got a combination of different policies, applications that you would assign to every default user, you can then create a policy set. So rather than having to go and create an assignment in each of your individual bits to us, we can then basically say, tick the boxes, all of these policies I want to go to this group. Just makes life a little bit easier from an assignment standpoint. So in the endpoint security world, this is probably one of the biggest changes, improvements in this in this world, which is just dragging all of the separate bits and giving them their own section. So I mentioned before in that devices section, when we go to create a configuration profile, we can create identity profiles, endpoint protection, but when you go and create them through here, they are a lot more straightforward because they're all very specific policies rather than a policy that covers across everything. So we've got specific exclusion policy, our antivirus policy, and the security experience. If we did that in configuration world, all of those would be in one single policy. Not necessarily a bad thing, but it means that you're scrambling around then trying to find within those policies, looking through all the various settings, trying to find what you're looking for. Disk encryption, firewall, endpoint protection, attack surface, account protection, device compliance and conditional access, all of those bits within here. I'm not going to go into too much detail on those because one of my colleagues, Pete Holland, has a webinar coming up later on in the month, if not, it might even be next week, which is going to go into more detail around the security elements of Intune. All I'm just going to say is, from a Tor perspective, this is where they live, and it's much more straightforward to go through it bit by bit and understand what falls into each of those policy sections. From a reporting standpoint, as I mentioned, there are some basic reports in here, device compliance, which at any point we can say go and get that report. We can do trends, usage, update reports, and this one, which the group policy analytics, which I'm going to go to in a moment because quite sadly I think it's quite cool. But relatively basic reporting. But under the data warehouse solution, we have our reporting feed, which we can then put into either Power BI, third-party reporting services, whatever it may be. And then you obviously have your reporting guys, your Power BI guys, who will then be able to manipulate that data in any way that they see fit. So the last bit I'm just going to show you is this. For this side for the reports is the group policy analytics. So it's still in preview, it's still quite new, but one of the big questions we always get asked is, how do I go from group policy to MDM? What's the path? How do I understand what I can do and what I can't do in another? And quite a while ago, Microsoft provided a tool called MMAT, Microsoft MDM Analysis Tool, which allowed you to run it on your local machine. It will take a snapshot of the group policies that are assigned to you, and then give you a report which tells you which settings work and which ones don't. They've now made that so much easier with this group policy analytics. If I move over to reports, not in that bit, and move over to it here, for whatever reason, I can then, and I've imported some baseline, these are Microsoft baselines that I've just taken from their website, and I've imported them in. You can import any GPO that's just as a GP report. So do a backup, get the XML, import it in. Obviously, if it's targeting in AD, it will recognize that. These are all just baselines, so they're not here. And yeah, not only does it tell us if the settings within that policy are 100% supported by MDM, I can see here that only 77% are. I can click on that, and it's also going to tell me what setting it is, which one specifically it is, if there's MDM support, and no, there isn't. So that means you need to, that option just isn't available anymore. And the fact that this one hasn't even got ADMX support means that it's probably been a deprecated policy. But say in my mind, I think that's really cool, and I think that's going to help a lot of you. Just remember that because it's MDM supported does not mean you're going to go and find an MDM setting for this. Use a custom setting using the URI that we find on here, and then the specific value that it's telling you to assign to it. Okay. The last bit is just jumping into this all services, because there are a couple of bits that you don't see within here. The most prevalent of all of them is desktop analytics. So I'm not going to use this one for this. I'm going to jump over into my one for this. Again, just because I actually have that information. So I mentioned it earlier. This is your home for finding out all the information about your assets, what your compliance situation is from updates, feature updates, what assets you've got. Are there any deployment plans you've got going on? You're monitoring from security updates and everything you've got going on there. And say you've then got the assets. So I can see all the devices that I've got here and the various bits of information about them. And on top of that, I can also go to the applications, see all the apps that I've got. It's identified that there are 504 noteworthy. That's based on total number of installs. And then we can start seeing how many installs there are, have they been reviewed, is there a support statement, is it going to work? All of that information is there for you, generally to make your life a lot easier as far as that question of, is it going to be compatible, is it going to work? Now, there is one last bit I just wanted to show you because it just reminded me jumping back into this portal. So one of the new configuration policies that we're able to set within the Windows world is a policy for health monitoring. Windows health monitoring. So when we create that policy, there's not a whole lot of settings in there. It's just basically we're going to turn it on. And what kind of scope is it going to include? Windows updates and endpoint analytics. So then it's able to go and get that information. And again, very cool feature that they've been talking about for a long time. Once you've got that assigned to a device, if I look at my device in particular, we get an extra option over here, which is user experience. And now, when people say, why does it take so long to log in? And IT's response is group policy. Now you can prove it. One way or another, you can prove exactly what it is that is causing delays to the login. So on the 2nd of November, I did a feature update and it took a minute from boot to get to the sign-in screen to then get ready. I've got very little from a group policy phase because most of my group policy has already been removed, but you would be able to see that it sat there for 5 minutes processing its group policy, giving you a much better idea of what's going on with that user and how they're with that user and the device. When they say it's taking forever, you can have a look and go, well, actually, it takes about a minute. That's not actually that bad. So with that, I'm going to leave it there. Hopefully that's been useful to some of you. So without going into too much specifics on all of it, hopefully it's given you a nice overview of where everything lives and some of the new fancy bits that have gone into it. Just jump back to the. So that's what's there at the moment. There's a couple of preview bits which we've got mentioned in here, and now there's kind of what's coming next. For anyone that wasn't aware, if you go to Google and search Microsoft 365 roadmap, there is a roadmap website where you can type in the solution that you're working with, and it will tell you what they've got developing and when it's supposed to be expected to drop and go into general availability. Some of those that are on that roadmap site at the moment include Windows 10 multi-session support, which is very much virtual desktop focused, something which a lot of customers are looking forward to. Intune management of user installed iOS applications. So that's again just a user experience thing that at the moment, if a user already has an app installed and then they go through the enrollment process, there is the potential that it wants to reinstall the application. This is basically just curtailing that, eliminating it and making sure that it's always going to be compatible. For those of you that have Surface devices, being able to create configuration policies for firmware management, making sure that secure boot UEFI settings are all up to date and turned on in the way that you want. Enhanced Microsoft Defender antivirus for small to medium businesses. So that's just a brand new portal, a much more redefined portal for people who are using the small to business, the business version of Microsoft 365. Obviously, group policy analytics, which I just showed you in preview. So there's obviously probably going to be a little bit more to come with that. And the last one is Microsoft Tunnel, which is something which people have been asking for a long time with Intune. It was talked about at Ignite about a month ago, which is not only being able to provide the per app VPN, but also actually having a termination point. So there's a lot of other MDM solutions that when they provide that per app VPN, they also provide the termination for that VPN. So they provide the whole end-to-end solution for it. And Microsoft never did. It relied on the existing app VPNs you've got to be turned on when that app is launched. This tunnel is going to replace that need, and instead it's just going to go straight through into your existing solutions, especially for using Windows 10 always on VPN. Integrate very nicely with that. So that's me done, I think, and with that I will hand it back over to Ross to wrap us up and go through any of the questions that might have come up.
Cool. Thank you very much, Mark. We now, like Mark says, have time for questions. So I can see we've got a couple up there at the minute. Please pop any more questions that you have in the chat box now. Whilst you are doing that, just like to say thanks again, Mark, for running us through that. That was really great. I've personally found it very informative. The desktop analytics looks really cool. And it's very important to have that visibility, obviously. So just to highlight, obviously the current slide which is on the screen, we do offer 2 accelerators around this area. So we've got a device management security review and a Windows Virtual Desktop POC. So these are fixed price starters, and they just help you get up and running with your endpoint management. We also have a number of events coming up in the next few weeks. The next one is actually Windows 10 Bring Your Own Device, which was with Pete Holland. I think Mark mentioned that earlier on. It's probably really handy if you found today's session useful to attend that one as well. And I will post a link to that in a moment. And just a final reminder, we've got the survey, which I've shared a link to in the chat box. If you could fill that in, that would be really great. It just helps us to work on these and improve them, and always keen to hear your feedback. So just moving on to the questions. The first one I can see is from Fernandez Joel. So for mobile devices, if app protection is acceptable for a bring your own device to protect the data, why would you not apply the same policies instead of device managed for a corp device?
Do you know what? That is a brilliant question, genuinely, and it's a question that I pose to every customer that I go and speak to. That is ultimately the big question that you've got for them. If you've got a corporate device and you insist on locking it down completely so that it can't do anything, it's very basic functionality, because you don't want people copying and pasting or doing whatever it is. Here's a device and here are the only apps. If you're then going to provide a BYOD solution that allows the user to kind of do whatever they want with the device, but you're obviously happy that the data is protected, then yeah, why do you feel the need to have the overbearing control over a corporate managed device? Now, the answer to that usually is because you own the device and therefore it's your asset. You want to protect it. The other reason is similar to a Windows desktop. If someone's using their own PC and they need to, let's say, start using Power BI, you've got to instruct that user, go here, get Power BI, install it, sign in, and you'll have to do this, that, and the other. If the device is fully managed, you can push that application to the device. So, same as you would in the desktop world. So that they've got it because you've pushed it to it. That's the key difference between the two of them, having the ability to push things to a device as opposed to waiting for a user to do that side of things.
Cool. So the second question we have is from Scott. Is this included as part of Enterprise Mobility and Security E3 licensing?
So everything that I've gone through today is available within the E3, within Microsoft 365 E3. The only bits that wouldn't be are some of the, although I didn't go into too much detail, is the security side of things. Most of the security elements are available with E3, but there are some that are only available if you're on Microsoft 365 E5. However, I understand that there is quite a large financial jump from an E3 to an E5, and Microsoft have understood that as well. So if you don't feel the need to have a full-blown E5 license, they have started providing a EMS security E5 add-on to your E3 solution. So you get some of the extra security bits, especially around the Windows Defender ATP. So you move up to Windows 10 E5 subscription and Windows 8 Defender E5, but the rest of it stays as it is. So it's a much more attractive way of getting some of the additional security features. But I don't think there's anything that I went through today specifically that requires E5.
Okay. So the next question is from Wouter Verboom, and in the applications management section, I got the impression that one can run Visio 2016 alongside Office 365. I did not think this was possible. able to clarify?
You can. It's just very complex and complicated to get them to work together. As I say, if you are using Office, if your Visio or project is 2016, then I can't quite remember the version numbers off the top of my head, but it's something like the 16 release. So what 60? They would have done a 1602 and a 1608. From those versions, they understand 2016 as a perpetual, and so they can coexist. However, if you then upgraded your version of Office 365 up to 1802 or 1808 or 19 something, that 2016 version of Visio or project will no longer work. It will no longer operate with it. So they can, and as I say, the best way to do it is to use the config.office website to create an XML. And then when you go and create your Intune application, rather than using the configuration designer, you can drop down the box and use an XML designer and copy and paste the XML into it. And it will then be able to use that in Intune to deploy it alongside.
Cool. And I think there's a second question, which is the licensing is user-based. So how does this work when managing shared desktops?
Microsoft have they are in the process of rolling out device-based license solutions. So at the moment, there isn't really. It's kind of when it's a shared machine, what they're doing is they're working on the basis that the OEM license for that device is covering the Windows 10 license on that machine. Each user that then signs into it afterwards has a subscription license, so therefore is able to continue using it. Ultimately, Microsoft have kind of moved away from this idea that, well, if there's a device there and no one's touching it, still kind of needs to be licensed. As long as when a user actively starts using it, that user is licensed. That's more kind of what they're concerned about from that side of things. But I understand that a device licensing solution is in the works.
Okay, brilliant. So it looks like that is all of the questions. If anyone thinks of any questions later on, please feel free to come back to us and we'll be happy to answer them. I will be sending out a recording of this webinar later. Thanks again, Mark. Really appreciate it. It was a really good session, and I hope that everyone who has attended today has found that useful. And hopefully we look forward to seeing you again. So just a reminder, the survey is in the chat box, and if you could fill that out, that would be really great. And thank you very much for all attending today. I hope you have a great day. Cheers.